On this episode of Textbook, we're joined by Will Crawford III, ESG Director of Follett Higher Education. As Earth Day approaches, we're stepping slightly outside our usual conversation with campus retail and auxiliary leaders to bring you someone focused on sustainability across higher education. Will leads environmental, social, and governance strategy across more than 1,100 campus stores in North America. He is the first ESG director in Follett's 150-year history. He also led the first ever company-wide greenhouse gas inventory in the multi-unit college retail sector. Will brings more than 2 decades of experience in higher education operations, field leadership, and organizational development. He serves on the advisory council for ASHE and is a frequent speaker on sustainability, leadership, and institutional impact. His work sits at the intersection of strategy, operations, data, and accountability, translating sustainability from an aspirational goal into something more measurable and actionable within the operational and financial realities of higher education. As always, the views shared here are those of the host and our guest, and not necessarily those of any current or former employer. Let's get into it with Will. Will, it's great to have you on the show. For folks who may not know you, can you give us a little background on how you got into sustainability and that side of higher education?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm pleased to be here with you fine folks. This is an exciting moment to hop on the cast here. Andy, great question. I'm going to start a little backward a little bit in how I got into higher education, which then led me into higher education sustainability. I started working for a collegiate retailer back in 2003 as one of my first jobs, and then I never left. I think most of us in higher ed like to stick around. So I've been there a little bit. Sometime in the early aughts, maybe mid aughts, sustainability and DE&I committees started to grow on college campuses around at least in the lower 48. And I was lucky enough to get on those committees pretty early on. And early on, we started talking about pretty basic things: master planning, where to put butterfly gardens, where to build buildings, what were we doing there? And then in maybe the tens, we started talking about carbon accounting, how to make reductions in your emissions. And I was lucky enough to be running college stores and at the same time on these committees. So I saw higher education, collegiate retail blended with higher education sustainability. And that's what got me in. It was really kind of luck of the draw. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time, and they put me on a committee.
Can I just rewind just a little bit there? One thing we've heard a lot about is the first positions in college retail. Were you a student worker when you started, or was this like your first job out of college, or
Yeah, yeah.
where did that fall in your career track?
Good question. I'm gonna go way back. My older brother, my older brother worked for the company I worked for. My older sister worked for the company I worked for, and I would come into the bookstores before I was legally able to work, and I would help do things like move a book around or move something. A manager said, "When you're legally able to work, come and see me." So, 15 or 16 years old, I walked into a warehouse, said, "Give me a job. My brother and sister work here." The manager said, "Great." And I started working in collegiate retail since high school. So it was my career, maybe not my first desired path, but once I was in the stores for a year or two and started to get a little bit more responsibility, it wasn't a place I wanted to leave. Like, I don't know. I mean, a high school kid on a college campus is also a kind of cool thing, but you also were delivering this education to these people who I respected and wanted to be around, these faculty and college students. So high school, and then just never left.
That's really amazing because I think you're the first person that's got into it before they went to college. So different story than we've heard from a lot of people, but there's a lot of ways you make it into auxiliaries. But I think you're the first legacy that started in high school that we've heard from. Mike,
That's
have you heard anyone else say anything like that?
no, that's the first. What I think is really interesting for Will. Will and I kind of grew up in the same place in this industry. Sometimes it's really hard. We get stuck, like, oh, all I can do is, run a bookstore. But I think what's really interesting for you is you've taken the passion that you've had for sustainability and you kind of created your own role, right? I mean, you are the first ESG director in Follett's history. And I haven't heard of anyone else in this industry with such a role. And it's really interesting and it's pretty unique. So can you kind of talk to me a little bit about, or talk to us a little bit about, um, kind of what you do? What is an ESG director, and how is that impacting sustainability globally in higher education?
Yeah. Great question. And I like the nod of being the first ESG director. That is true. And it's something I'm proud of. So ESG, for those that don't know, is environmental, social, and governance. It's an arm of sustainability specifically designed really for corporate entities, and it's how they manage and measure their sustainability efforts. So it's really kind of like a framework for the corporate entity. And I, on a day to day basis, try to look at a couple of things for the organization. Where are we making waste? Where can we save some costs or make a reduction? And how do we be regulatory compliant with things that are emerging, at least in the US and also globally? Those things are pretty important because you need somebody who takes the organization, puts it into a box, and then says, okay, here's all the things that have an impact on the organization that make us less resilient, more resilient. These are the things that are costing us money. And the underlying kind of driver is how are we impacting people and planet? So is the organization decrementing natural resources? Is that something that we need to impact? How are we impacting people socially? An organization creates a lot of social good by employing people, but then you have all of the other benefits to make the time that you're employed a healthy and positive experience. So I try to do that work across the organization and hopefully inspire other organizations within higher ed auxiliary services to do similar functions and similar things. But I'm really focused on people, planet, and profit. How do I make the company money is also materially important for the sustainability of an organization, especially a for-profit organization.
Well, when we're talking about sustainability, and I think when people hear the word sustainability, I'm going to put in air quotes, sustainability, it can mean a lot of different things. And when I think about it, I'm not sure what it actually means. So, in your experience and in the way that you think about this, what do people usually get wrong about what sustainability actually looks like day to day on our campuses?
Another good question, and it's a great question because sustainability is a broad term. It's broad for a number of reasons. Part is there's a system involved that created the term sustainability. A little light education, sustainability coined the term from the Brundtland Commission in 1987. So they defined what sustainability was. So that means the terminology, at least as we understand it today, is only about 40 years old. So because of the time in which we've defined the term, it makes the word kind of broad. It makes it kind of nascent in places and also nuanced, which is just a bunch of words. And so it doesn't necessarily answer your question. And so what do people get wrong about sustainability on a day-to-day operational basis? The first thing is it's always planet first. This is the first kind of issue that you'd run into is that you get people to say, well, aren't you just saving trees? We are trying to save the planet as well. But there's another couple of pillars within the term of sustainability. So you have people, you have planet, and you have profit. And you need to be able to impact those three pillars to have a stable, sustainable foundation, meaning that you can sustain the systems that we are working in without leaving a debt for a future entity, generation, or system. So if we, as an example, if we created, I use cars a lot, this is a good example. So we decided back sometime in the 1800s to have gas-powered vehicles. Those gas-powered vehicles now have an impact on climate change, and entire populations are trying to switch their transportation from fossil fuel to renewable energy. So sustainability in the terms that we think about it today existed in the mid 1800s. We would have thought, is this a renewable source that's not going to impact a future generation? We would have said no. We would have chose to go with Tesla's electric cars, Nikola Tesla's electric cars, instead of Ford's gas powered oil vehicles. So that is really sustainability from a day-to-day basis is how do we create solutions, fix problems that aren't going to cause an impact to the future entity or generation? Basically, don't leave them a debt. Hopefully that answered the question.
One of the things that I've noticed, and you're far more of an expert in this than me, but it seems like going the years preceding the COVID pandemic, it seemed like sustainability was a buzzword. A lot of people were talking about it. There was a lot of professional information about sustainability. And we got to COVID, and it seems like it's kind of trailed off a little bit. Does that sound fair to you?
I do think it's fair. I do think it's fair, and it's fair for a lot of reasons. Pre COVID, we had a generally undisrupted system. Now, that's a broad generalization because the systems were disrupted in a lot of different ways, but it hadn't affected every community, every society across the globe. So we didn't have a unifying impact, at least not at the scale of COVID. So it showed us a lot of the resiliency and not resiliency of cities, systems, municipalities, and systems in general. So after that, we had to rebound from COVID, get people back out into working however they needed, but it became a kind of a reset. During that reset, some of the administration, this is a little political because it is political in the sense it doesn't need to be, but it is. And some of the conversations move from investments that didn't create enough ROI or return to you're asking an entity or a company to do something that they don't necessarily want to do. And it's impacting their perceived ability to create business. Because of that, the corporate perception of sustainability, ESG, has waned in some cases. In other cases, it's actually just sort of accelerated quietly under different terms. So we might still be investing in green projects and renewable energy projects, but we're not talking about it as much. And so what happened is corporations are starting to do what's called green hushing, and they're still doing the same work. They're just not talking about it. So your perception, what's out in the market is true. Has sustainability in terms like ESG, has it waned over past since COVID? Absolutely. But the actions that are coming out of companies that are still focused on this work is still moving forward. There's a couple of Deloitte, McKinsey, and a couple articles that have some data points that are interesting. I'll follow up with those after. But
And it seems like there's been a shift from the small changes that were being asked as part of the sustainability movement. Think about ketchup packets going to large containers, getting rid of plastic forks that you may get with your plate lunch, those kinds of things to these. Now, there's still some push for that, but it isn't as vocal. And it seems like now there's bigger things that are being done and not these like ad hoc kinds of like little changes that seem to be before COVID and then had to be reverted during COVID because there was concern. You didn't want everyone touching the big ketchup dispenser.
yeah, it is. So it's interesting. So absolutely, did we take smaller measures before, and we really talked about those measures. Like, we really put them out there. We're moving to reusables in the dining hall, and we have eliminated plastic on campus, and we updated the lighting to LED. Right? Those were, I hate this term, but those were low hanging fruit. Those were quick wins. They provided benefit. Right? You didn't have to keep buying one time use materials. Now you could use reusables; those get recycled, they get washed. You might have a little bit more water, that's coming out because of that. Your LED lighting reduced the energy costs in those buildings, so your CFO was probably happy when they got the energy bill if they'd seen it. So, those
Mhm.
actions did some measurable things, but now it's what's next. And I think that's a really important question to have is, look, we already retrofit these buildings. We've started to update these inputs into our system that we know are costing us money or causing waste. And the next thing is, how do you do the next step? So beyond putting in LED lights, how resilient is your campus? How quickly were you able to get students back into seats after COVID? How many faculty and staff and administration did you retain? What does your current budget look like? Right? Like, what is your enrollment plan? How are you addressing the enrollment cliff? Those kinds of things are also part of the sustainability conversation because without that, there's no reason to reduce your emissions because your institution doesn't exist. And so, in my opinion, it's looking at the next resiliency plan for the campus, not just a sustainability plan, not just a climate action plan, but has the campus put together a really strong resiliency plan that you can think about the future and what impacts are going to happen. If there's a tornado tomorrow, and you've got finals. How do you pivot? How are they getting the materials? What are you going to do? How did that impact just general instruction? So I think that, campuses need to have pretty robust resiliency plans, and look for financing. Financing, every CFO that I've talked to on a college campus is worried about their budget. And there is hundreds of millions of dollars available in different forms to either put in solar or build a building or put in some educational, or I should say curriculum, to train and teach your faculty and staff and students. So that's my long-winded way to say resiliency plan.
It's kind of interesting. It's not the things that I would generally think of about sustainability, but it's such a broad field now. It just is one of those things where, getting to talk to someone like you see all these other facets of it than what I think most of our industry may think of when they first hear sustainability.
I want to talk some more about campus sustainability, but my jam is course materials. And I know that you have done a ton of work around understanding the ecological impact of course materials at Follett specifically, right? I mean, 1,100 campuses, millions of students, millions and millions of copies of physical textbooks. And, since 2015, we have seen this massive increase in adoption of access models, right? And I would say 90%, 99, 95, pick a number there in the 90s, are digital first. And so that really fundamentally changes the way that we order course materials and the way that course materials come to our store and the way that they leave our store. I really would love to hear what you have looked at with respect to sustainability in your role as ESG Director at Follett, what the impact has been on the environment with that move to hundreds or nearly 1,000 access programs.
Great question. And I'm so glad you bring it up because, obviously access guy, textbooks. I'm also a textbook person. So I worked in our stores for some 18 years selling course materials, going through the various different stages of how to bring in books, sell books, make sure that we had less on the shelf, which in the early days, I didn't really even think about that as a sustainability input, but your quantity to cover or how many books you bring in is certainly the first sustainable decision that a store faculty can make. When you over order, even if you have good faith that they're going to sell, there's a number of books left on that shelf. That becomes waste. No matter if we like it or not, those books are dead stock after we order them. Now, it's a personal opinion, but at some point, they're going to turn into dead stock. So knowing that the print industry still takes at least 60 to 70% of the industry, we still have a high level of print. But when you change the dynamic from student real choice to an access program where your course materials are just embedded and you have access to them and you don't have to think about getting your material, I think that certainly changes the conversation quite a bit because it takes away some cognitive thought. It gives the student the ability just to walk into class or drive into class or turn on the Zoom and get into class and have the materials. So that's a really great social thing. Not only does it reduce the cost, but it increases the time of instruction. I love that part of it. From an ecological standpoint, every print textbook, carries about 3.5 kilos of carbon emissions, which translated into US is like 7 pounds. Right? So a little bit more than 7 pounds. A digital book is like a kilo, so it's like 2 pounds. Right. So there's just a pretty big difference there between the two product types from the first environmental input of carbon. So if you want to make a really quick carbon decision, go access, go digital. It's only affecting one part of the system and the constituency that you have. Students also, not all of them like digital. So while you are trying to make an environmental change, you have this other stakeholder group that you have to address. But there's methods and ways to do that. But using that digital component immediately reduces the first emission of the creation of the print book. And then to your earlier point, the logistics, moving that book between warehouses in Ohio or wherever they are to all over the country and the world. And textbooks are heavy. They're just heavy. In the olden days when I didn't have time to count I don't know if Follett wants to know this, but when I didn't have time to count boxes, we would weigh them. So we'd weigh the shipment and say, oh, it's off 3.2 pounds. One of the Nichols books is missing out of the shipment. You shipped me 59, not 60. So books are really heavy, and not having to move them means that you have a reduction on the emissions of travel from your logistics provider. You have, and this is digital transition, you have an ease on your employees that don't have to pack and unpack and repack and sticker and touch the product several times. And then you affect that waste stream that I talked about earlier. That quantity cover goes away. It is immediately eliminated with digital because there's nothing to throw away. Now, some of the hardened sustainability professionals that might be listening to this will say, pause, Will. There is a host of things needed to run that digital content. You have servers, you have devices, you have embodied carbon. So you can't eliminate that part of the conversation. And I would say to them, that's true, but we got to take one step at a time. So like, let's reduce the shipping, let's reduce the time, let's increase the instruction for the students, and let our teachers teach with digital, and then give them the tools to do that. So ecologically, to summarize, you're making a quick decision to reduce your emissions, reduce the logistics of shipping, and you're gaining access to materials faster for your students.
That's excellent.
Can I
And
just jump in real quick
Yes,
here?
please go ahead. Go ahead, Dr. Andy.
There's something that you said in there that's totally off topic, but it's so interesting to me. You mentioned a particular textbook, and I think I always hear that textbook mentioned between course material, people that work in bookstores. Can you just tell me why it's that one textbook that gets always mentioned?
I don't know. It's probably, so I am such a nerd. So there's
Can you repeat the textbook in case you missed
so there's
it?
the Nichols management book. There's probably 3 titles that people talk about a lot: Nichols management, and then I'll say 2, Campbell's biology. Campbell's biology is just heavily saturated into the market, and it just went out like wildfire. Yeah.
This thick.
Yeah, it's crazy. I should say that, but it's wild. It's a really thick book. People use it all over the place, so it's very saturated. If you took a biology class in college, you probably touched the Campbell book. If you took a management, similar, different publishers, but if you took a management class, you probably used the Nichols book. And it's going to get real nerdy because the Nichols book, as you went from first edition to like 5th, 6th generation, they changed the color of the cover. And there was a 5th generation Nichols that is like this metallic bluish color. And so it stood out on the shelf too. That's probably not why people chose it, but I'm sure that their pub reps brought it into the management teams and showed it around. So to answer your question, heavily saturated textbooks. Management classes people take a lot of them in biology classes. People take a lot of them for gen ed. So you'll hear.
Yeah. And I think Dr. Mike is guilty of both of those. So I just picked that up in the conversation, and I was like, I have to ask this one. So I'll let you get back to
No, it's great.
Dr. Mike on better sustainability questions than why we used certain textbooks names.
Yes.
There are so many different books where I can still see them. Like I still have nightmares of ordering them and unboxing them. And there's a little bit of trauma, involved in getting 17 pallets of books before rush and breaking your back slinging boxes. So thanks for that.
The Chili Pepper Blitzer stuck in my mind. California Triola, which is the statistics book, the stats book. There's a couple.
Everybody listening is like, I have a book,
Yeah.
and they know the book. Seeley's Anatomy as the most recent one. Again, going to loose leaf makes it a little less heavy.
Yeah.
But still gives you nightmares. I want to put you on the spot. I didn't ask you to be prepared for this question, but when we go back to the carbon emissions of print and digital and the freight, you're really smart. You are a Harvard man, after all. So is there a stat in your brain that you can remember in the work that you're doing at Follett, like the overall impact of company-wide digital, like the access programs? Is there any data point that you can pull from the back of your brain? Is like, I know that this is the impact of the program X.
Yeah, it's about a 90 or so % reduction when we move from print to digital. And I want to say, you know what, though? You did put me on the spot, and I did a paper on this exact number, and I have the data point somewhere. I know the difference is 90%. I know that we roughly have transitioned. We put about 11 million units into the system, and about half of those 6 million were digital. Oh, I don't know the math on that.
Good.
So I,
No,
I, I don't I don't have the perfect data point for you, but it's about a 90%. And at scale, I can say just from a logistics standpoint, so just a shipping standpoint, here's a real data point that's verified by UPS. So Will didn't make it up. Our carbon intensity with logistics is about 67 to 68% lower than any other vendor that ships roughly what we ship. And we ship in the millions of packages. And from year over year, can't give an exact number, but we've been reducing down hundreds of thousands of packages that have been shipped, which is then reducing our carbon intensity. So we started out, and a carbon intensity just is we took the kilos of shipped and we divided them by number of packages. We got an intensity when you took how many carbon emissions for each shipment. And we've been able to reduce that year over year by at least a percentage or two. So starting out when we were mapping, we were at about a 28%, and now we're roughly about 27% in intensity. So broad impact, but we are making a reduction, and we're making that reduction measurably in where we ship our textbooks.
Right. And that's the thing is, when we think, oh, we're going digital, so that means that we're gonna bring in less
Mm.
physical, right? So we think of shipping from the aspect of bringing the books into the store and then, potentially returning them, doing chargebacks if we didn't sell them. But there's also the element of shipping orders to students, right? That is another piece that goes away, right? If you're running a store and you're moving more towards digital, you're not having the labor to process your online orders. You're not having the labor to box and ship out all of those physical books that are now part of an access program in digital. So as this store, we talk about the holistic ways that access programs impact students, cost savings, um, their ability to interact with the educational environment through actually having their books, not losing the stigma of not being able to forge your books, the impact that we've seen in outcomes, pre-post implementation. But as a store now, you can also talk about how what you're making for an environmental impact.
Yeah.
We're not shipping out all of this stuff anymore. We're not bringing in all this stuff. We are contributing to our campus sustainability efforts in a digital first access model like that.
Yeah, and you're absolutely correct too. And I didn't talk about just getting to the student to the consumer's hands. And think about this. I've been a college student. Y'all have been college students, right? Maybe we didn't have enough money to buy those books. Maybe we're waiting for refunds to come in. Maybe XYZ happened. It's the first day of class. I need my book, right? I don't have it. So I had it shipped. From a location. Now I have to wait several more days to get that book, or I got to walk into the bookstore and pick it up. With a digital first approach, and especially in access programs, if done the way I think they should be done, and like you can push back, but if it's sitting in your LMS and you log into that class, you sit down in that class and you have your material, then you've certainly been able to provide access to the material much faster, and the shipping time is just gone away. There's not, waiting on the mail. I remember one of these books, it was a biology class. I'm waiting in the mail. I'm like checking my mail every day. I've got homework due. I've got to submit this essay. And I'm like, I need to read page 12. Nobody has page 12. So it does really help improve the instruction, but it also helps. And that's a dollars perspective too, right? Every shipment from the student, when they pay for shipping, they've got to pay a dollar amount. So you're saving students in their shipping costs. And then we're saving the entity shipping that book, their shipping costs back to their logistics provider, whether it's FedEx or UPS. So going digital also has that other shift effect from resource saving from the entity that's choosing digital, and then from the student who's saying they don't have to spend 7 or 8, 9, $10 to get that book shipped to them.
Right. And I would really love Dr. Andy to step in here and bring it back to the campus, right? So we just, we just went over course materials because obviously I'm a nerd in course materials, but really bringing it back to the campus, because this isn't just, you know, bookstore podcast. I mean, we really want to talk about auxiliary services, because I think auxiliary services has the ability to take sustainability to the next level when you compare it singularly to the bookstore.
And I mean, the wider field of auxiliaries, you're just beginning to have that much more impacts on things because you're bringing in larger systems too. I mean, bookstores being a key part of auxiliaries, but you have food services, which have huge sustainability impacts. And you also have parking and transportation that has huge sustainability impacts. Food with food waste. We got parking with admissions, trying to get to students to school in alternative ways that may have lower impacts. But, one of the things that's really occurring on campus, and you alluded to it earlier, you mentioned the enrollment shift, but there's also a financial part of that. And we're seeing impacts to our budgets and our staffing and our operational costs. And I think that's a fair kind of line to kind of look at, that colleges aren't in the best place right now. Some are doing really great, but not all of them. And we're looking at those, but we're having some hard conversations about budget. How do you balance these sustainability goals with the financial and operation realities that are occurring? Where does this fall on our priority list or agenda? I think everyone at the end of the day wants to do the best for everything, but our leaders have bandwidth. So what would you tell a leader when you're talking about sustainability, but you also have to acknowledge that budget and operational side?
Great question. I think sustainability folks, they approach this conversation, this question often. And there's a reason. It's almost back to earlier in the conversation about it being nascent and, sort of new and nuanced, is that we still treat sustainability as this thing that lives on the periphery. How do we get it in? How do we get it into the goals? And I think that's almost, to be candid, I think that's the wrong way to think about it. We want to shift our thinking and say sustainability is not an alternate goal to your organization or your campus. It should be a unifying goal. So when the questions are about budget, staffing, operational efficiency, it's how do we embed that sustainability conversation within all of those discussions? Because the sustainability person should be trained or understand large systems, interconnectedness of things, and then create some kind of solutions to help impact each one of those business units. And it goes to, what is the actual goal of the campus? The goal of the campus might be, I think we all have these very general goals, is to graduate students, right? I think that's everybody's goal. Let's get the student in, graduate the student, make sure they're educated. That's the big goal. But it's, if you have a budget decline, well, your sustainability person should be looking out for resource and reduction of costs, working very closely with your finance team. It is master planning and the environmental side of things. And we're looking at how do we make an improvement in the beautification of our campus and what do we plant? That might be a facilities discussion. And you might be saying these plants and these things will impact or make a benefit to the campus, how it looks. If it's just from a purely operational efficiency or just operational driver, I think that as you begin to reduce waste and increase perception, because I think this happens in unison, you start reducing the waste on campus, you increase some perception, you can market your efforts. And I know this sounds like it's very kind of like it's businessy part, but all campuses do marketing. All campuses go out through recruitment. What makes your campus different? And sometimes that is actually sustainability. And so if you need a differentiator to draw in students into your campus, it might be marketing your sustainability efforts. So I think to go all the way back to, what do you tell a leader who is balancing, should I do sustainability or should I do ABL, or I mean, keep the lights on basically in finance? And I would tell that person, you need to do both, but you need to have the person at the meetings. You need to have them in a position, maybe not a decision-making position all the time. Like I can't go in and say like, Andy, you got to do reusables. Doesn't matter. I don't care if you like blah, blah, blah. You got to do that. Okay. I wouldn't say that, but you do want to be at the table. And this is an extremely important part of sustainability professionals right now, is Don't keep them in a box or somewhere just doing data analysis. Is they're good at that. Sure, we love that. But bring them to the table with the senior leadership of the campus so they can hear the problems, so they can have solutions that might not have been thought about before. And it's not, I'm doing sustainability over here and I'm doing all of my other campus stuff over here. It's, we have a unified goal and sustainability helps unify both nuts. So hopefully that.
And as you're talking about it, it seems like you're talking about a dedicated person to sustainability. Is there value in maybe having employees that have a percentage of their job related to sustainability? So instead of having, or in addition to having maybe that one person that's the sustainability coordinator, the vice president of sustainability, whatever their title is, the chief Cuba of sustainability, is there value in having your management level staff have sustainability as part of their job? So um, they're kind of 75% the manager of the cafeteria and 25% they have a sustainability role. I mean, I think sustainability in general is becoming part of all of our jobs, but is it something that as you begin creating new positions or redefining your positions, are you looking for your staff to have that as part of their day-to-day kind of responsibilities?
Yeah, I think it's a perfect solution because we talk about budgets and adding staff is a budget discussion. So as much as you want to, I'm talking about blending sustainability in every decision, you also might just not be able to afford to have a human doing or leading or managing these projects. So I do agree that if you identify opportunity, that the campus can say, hey, we've got opportunity. It's going to be a portion of your role. This is the percentage, and HR can cut up all that good stuff. But I think that's very important. Arizona State University, my undergrad, they are putting sustainability into their general education. 144 to 190,000 students are coming out of that institution with at least some baseline understanding of sustainability. So people are out there that are learning and gaining this skill set and, want to stay in higher education. They have this, passion to do good, but they also have this passion to, lead and do other things. So yeah, I would say add it to job descriptions, give people the opportunity to do it because it gives that role, that person, cross-functional visibility on the campus. That's why I was on those committees. One, it was a little commercial, like I needed to be known on campus and embed myself into the campus, but it gave me the opportunity to go to the commencement committee because we were talking about commencement sustainability. The sustainability committee was going to the dining committee. The dining committee was talking about waste. The dining committee was going to the budget committee and then to Senate. And so you really were able to go a lot of places on campus and it just gives the person the opportunity. So good summary is adding that opportunity is a low cost way to add sustainability efforts to your organization. I would also be remiss if I didn't say partnership with your auxiliary services. These organizations bring resources. Corporate entities that you bring in bring a level of resource and partnership that you might not think you could rely on. But like myself, there is a dedicated person at this organization that can try to help some other organizations do what they'd like to do. But I'm an advocate for adding positions. I mean, obviously it helps my industry. So not to speak for my own trees, but I think it's a good idea. Yeah.
So just building on what you were saying there, you're talking about in campuses that are fairly contracted out to lean on those contractors to bring in sustainability expertise to your campus because they have people like yourself there.
Yeah, it's a good summary in if you have that ability. If there is some contracted services on your campus, that's a great way to also get some of your initiatives moved forward, at least have committee. They have similar goals and sometimes they're under regulatory pressure. So meeting those goals helps that campus's goal. And if you don't have contracted service, because there's a lot of institutions that don't, and you're right, adding a position, if you have the ability to do so, adds a lead. You don't have the budget to add a position is give the opportunity to your faculty, staff, or your student groups to try to help drive some of the initiatives forward. If it's student groups, the same thing with anybody. Give them a seat at the table, and make sure they understand the problems they're trying to address.
One of the things that's interesting uh, in sustainability and the under the umbrella is we saw you at a conference a couple months ago, and you were doing a presentation with another company. There are organizations out there. There are companies that are working with campuses on sustainability that have that profit piece
Mm-mm.
baked into
Yep.
it, right? Like we don't need to. They're not paying for the podcast, so we don't need to name names. But there are groups and organizations out there. One of the ones I think that we should say is ASHI, and I don't remember what that stands for, but I know that you're something you're heavily involved in. That would be a great resource. But there are other innovative partners out there that will help you with sustainability if you don't know where to start, right? Like the one that we saw was about food waste and recycling and students making decisions in the cafeteria. And there's an interactive trash can, which is, I know not what it is, but basically campuses can go there, auxiliary services, housing, dining, people who are involved in these activities on campus. There are places for them to go to get help. Some may cost, some may not cost them out of pocket, but there are those resources that could help them get started.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. And ASHI is a great one, great organization, heavily involved with ASHI for the.
Can you give the whole
Yeah,
organization
I
name
will.
for us?
So it's the Association for the Advancement of Sustainability Higher Education. There's another one out there, Second Nature. Those two organizations heavily support our higher education community with resources, with webinars, with conferences, with connecting practitioners with professionals. A lot of resource help there. And so I would echo what you said, Mike, is if you're not sure, lean on those organizations too, ASHI and Second Nature. Were literally created to help affect sustainability in our industry. So great partners and great ad. I should have thought of this one. I love AC.
You also see the topic generally discussed at your broader auxiliary services professional organizations, your NACUSs, your NACs, your NACUFs, those kinds of things. They're bringing in products that are, along those lines. We saw you talking with the AI garbage can at one of those organizations, NACUS. It's one of those things where if you don't know as an auxiliary service professional, there's definitely resources out there that you should be tapping into to get those better understanding. And it's just part of the professional development cycle of auxiliary services. If you're taking advantages of going to conference and stuff, you're going to be exposed to some of these ad hoc type solutions. You're also going to see the larger organizations being introduced to those kinds of things too. So you should be getting some exposure to it. But one of the things that I like about what you're saying is you're talking about a more holistic kind of versus one-off type attitude towards sustainability, which is, to me, probably the way we need to be driven, is to be looking at it parts that, all of these products and all of these solutions and all of these components come into. But, are we having those bigger conversations in auxiliaries about, what is the holistic looking at sustainability and actually getting a fairly clear definition? Because I think one of the things that we have had today is being able to build this bigger definition uh, of sustainability away from just being single-use plastics, paper straws, ketchup packets, those kinds of things, to being how does it impact employees and those employees' budgets, long-term organizational health, long-term planet health.
Absolutely. I mean, it's circularity. We in the industry of higher education it's a cyclical. Right? It's cyclical. We all work on our academic calendar. We all know what's happening. It's always a circle. And sustainability is a circular function. You're trying to emulate nature's cycles where something grows, something dies, and it gets put back, and all resources are consumed efficiently. That's where we have not broken the veil yet in sustainability, is to have a real clear outlook on circularity and regeneration, and how it does take a holistic approach to any system, the college system, your broader, larger municipality or city state systems. And in my belief, higher education and the campus community is a microcosm of the larger society. So, what we are able to do here in this environment, we test case it, pilot it, and then deliver it to the broader systems. So, yeah, you do want to take a very holistic approach. You want to make sure that all these things are interconnected. And we work in silos. Y'all are higher education professionals. There is oftentimes campuses that have silos. Some departments don't work well with other departments, yada, yada, yada. It's fine. But, like going to those meetings and say, look, we have a goal here where our goal is to graduate students and it's to do it in the best way for the people that we impact, the planet that we are taking resources from, and the economy in which we are hoping to build by, really delivering an ROI to a nonprofit space.
So, Will, we've touched on data points throughout this conversation, but, you know, data points are a product of a lot of work, right? And so as we're looking at, sustainability, one of the things that I think is key in this whole thing is providing good data to make decisions. Now, if you were looking at a campus, and we can start with bookstores because I know that's closer to your home and then expand out, but I know you're well versed in probably food services and parking and transportation and housing and all those other things too from your background. If you were going to talk to a director of campus services, a director of auxiliary services, what data points would you be telling them to pay attention to? And what would you tell them about collecting the data as they set up their sustainability program?
Yeah. Data is, and I know you're a data person. So data also in the sustainability world is materially important. We love data. Data is paramount, and I believe this, right? If you can't measure something, can't manage it. So first we have to be able to collect this data, and then you use the broad term of data. I need data. Like, what is that data? So you have to help people understand what they're collecting, why they're collecting, and how to collect it, right? And I think that's the basis of the question. And for any part of campus, any entity of campus, I look at two things first, and that is your energy, which translates to your carbon impact. So I look at your energy first, and then I would look at your waste. And waste then gets a little bit more complex depending on which unit of the campus you're looking at. Bookstore waste might be the textbooks that we bring in, might be cardboard, might be remodeling, building waste. Dining, that's food, that's water, and housing, that's unused rooms, probably becomes waste if you can't book the entire res hall. So different kinds of waste. Then you have different kinds of strategies. So if we go backwards to, I think, the first one, carbon accounting and energy, this is it's pretty easy in the first sense is you start connecting your utilities, right? And you start looking at your utility bills because your utility bills will tell you your year end, your month end, or your quarterly end usage. And you start putting that data together, and then you build what I would call like a hotspot map. And then you look at building. It's challenging when I use building to building because I think y'all know that, one building might have facilities in it, one building might have a lab in it, one building might have, classrooms in it and something else. But if you look at it just very simplistically, when you do that analysis, you collect the data from, and this is energy data from these buildings. Building X seems to be hotter. It's using more energy than building Y. Just a simple question. Why is that occurring? And you could do some light surveying, you can ask some questions, but you'll start finding out why they're using more energy or less energy. And then that creates a solution. Could be something, and I'm thinking about something very interesting. The sustainability professional at Loyola here in Chicago, they've got a beautiful sustainability team and department. And he did something very simple. His name's Aaron, but he did something very simplistic. And he put a message on the computer screens, like a screensaver, that basically told people to turn the lights off. That was it. That's all he did. People started turning the lights off. And guess what? They reduced the energy on campus in that one particular building. So they were looking at the data points. If you have the ability to do this, you can also contract with a service that will effectively connect all your utilities, pull all the data, do an analysis for you, and then regurgitate that back to you. But in a grassroots world, I would pull my energy bills first. After I know where the spikes are, I would start creating solutions. That's the first most simplistic way to go about it. Carbon accounting gets pretty complex, and you have to use emissions factors and coefficients, and you have to use these guides to do a bit of math to take, this energy that I in kilowatt hours turned into this amount of global warming potential that turned to this amount of CO2e or carbon equivalency gas, and then you come up with this big number, and you present it, and you're like, here's all the metric tons of carbon that we've emitted. It's kind of a long way to answer your question. Very back to the beginning is I look at 2 points. That is your energy use on campus, which translates to carbon or emissions, and then the waste within the campus or the department itself. Track those 2 things first, and I think you'll be on your road to success.
I think that's very solid advice. So, what are the 3 things besides the data side? So 3 things that you would say that auxiliaries should be doing now, whether it's adopting a service, whether it's a best practice. What are the low-hanging fruits? What are the new exciting products? What are the 3 things that if I turned around today and we're going to make some short-term changes, what should I be doing?
Yeah. Another great question. What does everybody do? That's what's fun about being in sustainability is that you could do anything, right? Like I could be an accountant. Nobody's coming to ask me the new gap regulations. Right? So maybe they are. I don't know. I should speak bad about accountants. I'm technically an accountant for the environment. But we get to be in a position to say, here's the new and the exciting and the fun stuff that's coming out. So I think first and foremost, if a campus is not measuring their emissions or their impact, that's the first step. Like at a minimum, start working on measuring the impact because the campus will want to set some goals, or the institution should set some goals. And again, if you haven't measured it, you can't manage it. And I think that becomes a big problem in sustainability. You see companies, I'll speak more of the commercial side, but you see companies saying, we want to reduce emissions by 25%. Well, I haven't seen a carbon report. What are you reducing? I don't know what you're doing. Right. And so measure that, measure that first so you can make some goals. Number one, I think is the best thing to do. The second thing that I think to do is look at, I'm definitely going to say this, look at products and services that change how your operation runs. And even if that's access programs, like just back to the bookstore, if you don't have an access program, that's one of the easiest things that you could do today. It's not easy. I got Mike on the phone. It's got a lot of, things included in that system. It might take some time. Build an access program because you reduce your impact, you increase time of education, you increase butts and seats. We know that students are sticking around for a little bit longer because they have access to materials. And what does that do to the campus's budget? You keep a kid there, they're going to pay tuition, they're going to stay in school. You do 2 things. You increase the ROI of that student or you maintain it, and you also put an educated student out into the world. It's a beautiful thing. So the third thing that any organization can do is begin to educate themselves. If they don't have you don't even need a robust sustainability program. Find out if there is classes maybe not offered at your institution, but other institutions. ASU has tons of free sustainability courses that you can take, and so do many others. But I would say educate people, and then you're all having sort of similar discussions. It's a lot easier if we all speak the same language when we're trying to fix or come to a solution for.
That's great. So one question that we've liked to ask is, we'll all eventually come to the end of our careers. I don't think yours is anytime soon. I know you have a lot of good things to do before that happens. But what are the things that you want to accomplish with your career before you ride off into that sunset?
Another great question. I'm so honored to be on this show also. I get up and I do the sort of tactical work of sustainability. I'm like in a spreadsheet and, blah, 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 and doing that.
Well, we're really happy to have you on our show too. If you didn't notice, both Mike and myself are wearing green today in honor of you.
Yeah.
and the work that you're doing. So we're really excited to have you as part of this too, kind of thing.
Well, I love it. Well, greener pastures, right? That's a horrible joke. So, but it's a ride out in the sunset. How I would like to sunset my career. There's a lot of big things that I think that could be really exciting for higher education sustainability and helping campuses not close. I think it's such a lofty goal to look at regional institutions. There might be consolidation. We know that, things consolidate and, not everything can last forever, or careers included. But I would like to look back and say, I helped save these campuses. And it seems lofty as a thing, but I really would like to sit back in a chair on a porch somewhere, maybe a cup of whiskey or something, and say, this is what I did. And I was able to make sure that, this institution stayed open, because that's millions and millions and millions of thinkers and scholars that have been, pushed out into the world. And that alone increases our social credit and debit. And, the entire population becomes a little bit better the more educated we are. And I think that's really what I would like to look back and say, I had a part in making sure our system remained resilient, and we help students learn and become educated.
You're amazing.
That's
The work that you do, the vision that you have, and you just keep driving this. You keep driving the conversation in the industry. You keep pushing the envelope. You keep looking for new ways to think about sustainability across all of our campuses. And just having you here to be able to talk about it, to put thoughts in the world, I've never been able to think of a fraction of the things that you've talked about today. I've never been able to put them into any words. And for us to be able to hear them from you, and hopefully that we have some folks that are listening that can take some of these words, go back to their campus and ask questions, right?
Yeah.
We're not going to change the world overnight with this podcast. But if something you've said is stuck with someone and they can go back and ask a question, or hey, why are we not doing this, or how come I'm not part of this, that could spark something that could change, right? Like what I always said running a store, the decisions I make right now are not about today. They're about 6 months, a year, 3 years away, right? If we can do something today that helps somebody later, that helps them figure something out or be part of a conversation, or really focus planet, people, profit, and really drive sustainability, it's worth every second that we spend talking about it.
Well, I mean, obviously I agree 100%. I obviously agree, but you're right. Go back, ask a question, get involved, get active as you can, and proceed down the journey of sustainability. Like, it's 40 years old. There's a huge amount of opportunity out there to continue. And I'm just one voice of a million, but there's a ton of opportunity to think differently, to think in systems, to try to affect the system that you work in, and to all the way back to that earlier definition, don't leave a debt to the future that they can't pay back. Right? Like, we should all be thinking that way. Right? That's just the resiliency of species, not just our own, but others too, flora and fauna.
Well, thank you so much for being here today. We appreciate having you. I know that I've learned a lot, and you're awesome. And we are so lucky to have you on the show. So thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, you're very welcome. I appreciate it. I'd do it again. Let's do it again.
All right, man. We'll see you soon.
All right. Well, take care. Thanks, Andy. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Textbook. If something you heard today stays with you, take it back to your own campus and feel free to share it with a colleague or friend. We'll see you next time.